I'm going to stare at the screen, and then you are going to stare at me, and we're going to stare at each other. Oh, hey, everybody! Welcome to a new edition of Shaman Sundays. I'm your host, Brandon Cooper. Wow, we just started, and we have 7 viewers. I love you people. If it wasn't for viewers like you, I wouldn't even have a show. So, Carol, hello, Chad. Signe, wow, you actually watch my show. I love you so much, Signe. Danielle, hello. Rebecca, hi. Look at everybody. Oh my God, you people make my day every Sunday. Sean, what's up? Hey, you know what, guys? We have an awesome show. Wait a minute. Wait, I'm forgetting to do something, aren't I? What am I forgetting to do? I'm forgetting to light the sage. We got to light the sage. So, brand new sage. Oh. So we're going to light the sage. We're going to get this started. You know, I always try to have a really good show for everybody. This healing goes out to everybody that needs it, that wants it. Greg, hey, buddy. Greg's going to be on the show in December. Let's see. What do I need to cover? Let's see here. I know on the 22nd, the Hellraiser Rock and Ride for Homelessness and Addiction went off. I watched some of the video that Dina had up. That was in Middletown, Ohio. That looked like it was amazing. I hope that she pops in here soon. We can find out how it did. But that lady, oh my God, she has such a good heart, trying to help the community with homelessness and addiction. And as I've said before, I was both homeless and addicted to alcohol. So if it wasn't for people like her or people like you that care, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. You know what? I'll cover that at the end of the show because I have a friggin' packed, and I mean packed show. Today's guest is PRI, also known as Paranormal Research Institute. I met them at the Paracon, the Haunted History Paracon down in Joplin, Missouri, last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm tired. I'm traveled. I don't know, but I met them, and we got to actually investigate together. We did the old Route 66 theater, and these people are amazing people. I think we all clicked. Linda, good evening. I think we all clicked, and I just had to have them on my show, especially after hearing some of the experiments and some of the ways that they are doing things. As a tech guy myself, I'm fascinated. So you know what, without further ado, you know what, Carl, let's bring the whole posse up. Let's just bring everybody. Dan and Scott.
Hey. Hi, guys.
Lisa.
Hello.
And Mike, can you hear us?
I can hear you, and you can hear me, hopefully, but can't see me because I don't have a reflection in mirrors. You know, that doesn't work for me.
You know, that's okay. It's the first, as long as you don't sparkle in the sun, we're good. Worst vampires ever.
He turns into pixie dust at night.
Oh, well, I mean, you know, hey, I'm not allowed to ask questions like that. I was in the military.
Yeah, that says it all.
I'm just saying. So let's go to my right, Dan and Scott. Let's start with y'all. How about give us just a quick little overview of your organization.
All right. Well, I'm Dan. Dan Williams. I started the PRI back in 2014.
2014.
So we've been doing this for a while. Reason we actually started it was we were looking for a better way to do investigations. Typically, when investigations happen, people go out, they investigate, people get some really cool things, but it's never really documented, and so you can't really build on information that's not documented. And so the very base of the PRI was always documentation and tracking data, things like that. And so that's really where our base came from. And then we incorporated what we call the random event generator, which I will let Mike address in just a few minutes. But it really started with, we developed a method we call cartography, where we have an outside investigator who is not actively investigating, and they are literally charting the events that the teams that are investigating are having minute by minute through the whole night. So it's a little different way, and by doing that, we can start looking at some data trending and pattern, things like that. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was going to say,
There he is. Hey,
Yeah.
there you are. Woo!
I pretty much agree with. I don't want to just repeat everything Dan said, but I was also, when I met Dan, I'm more of the scientific kind of a geeky. I like. I was in love with Ghost Hunters. That was on and started in 2004, I believe. But I always thought that there should be a better way of documenting and organizing paranormal activity, because up to this point we really can't prove anything, or like we talked about before with Carl. None of us are experts, but I always thought if there could be a way to scientifically somehow put this field into a category where we can explain it a little better, or perhaps forecast it,
start to understand it.
We I know we're just scratching the surface, but the reason I got involved with this project is because I believe that there's more than just running around a house getting spooked.
Agreed.
So that's my little gig.
I like it. And now we move down to Lisa. Lisa, you look lovely this evening.
Thank you.
Wow. You dressed up for the show. Thank you.
Well, I did change out. I contemplated wearing my Chiefs gear, but I changed. I didn't want to go.
Well, that's okay. Ricky, hey, Ricky. So what part do you play in this scientific madness?
So I am the researcher and historian, and I will research the locations, try to get as much history as I can, divulge that to who wants and needs to get it. Some people want to stay dark with that, and they don't want to know it, so it doesn't influence their interpretation or their information. I'm also the location logistics and try to keep things on track. And then I also do some psychic work. And we've been with you all now for 3 years?
3, yeah.
3, if not 4. It's been
4 years, but COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well,
about 4 years.
Tried to kind of work through some of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we invited Peggy and Lisa into our group, and they formerly had their own group, but they're also a member of the PRI.
Awesome. And then Mike, you also look lovely this evening, Mike. I can see that.
Thank you. Good dress up for the occasion. I hope you can, appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, I see you're wearing your tux. Thank you. Yeah. So where do you fit in the madness?
Well, I try to fit in. I don't know if I fit in entirely, but let's see. I have a long time, actually lifelong interest in the paranormal. And it started when I was a little kid, and my grandmother grew up in the Ozarks and told me stories about ghosts when I was just very young, and I had no reason to question her. She was one of the wisest women I ever knew. And as I started growing older, people started challenging me, excuse me, about my beliefs and saying, "Well, there's no such thing as ghosts. Prove it," you know. And I think if somebody had said that to my grandmother, she would have just laughed and said, "I don't need to prove it. I've had these experiences."
Right.
I took that as kind of a challenge and started to get interested in the scientific study of the paranormal. I thought, well, if there really are ghosts, there should be scientific literature on it. And I started going to my local library and looking stuff up. And I guess I ended up joining the American Society of Psychical Research when I was a freshman in high school.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I know. I wrote a letter to, uh, well, actually, originally Fate magazine, but then they forwarded it on to the ASPR about how to use electronic equipment in the investigation of hauntings. And this would have been way back in like 1966 or something like that. I'm dating myself. And so, yeah, but not too many people had thought about that. But there was a great article by Charles Tart in the old ASPR journal. And they forwarded that to me about all kinds of detection equipment that could be used by investigators. He even talked about equipping a small van full of this stuff and moving it around from site to site. And I thought that was a great idea. Anyway, I just kept interested all through the years. And in college, as an undergraduate, I was a psychology major with a broadcast double major, and I had a concentration in parapsychology. They didn't have a degree in parapsychology at the University of Missouri, but all my everything I did there, pretty much in the psychology department, was geared to that. All my papers and so forth. And let's see. After that, fast forward down the lane, and I was teaching a graduate level course in parapsychology at the University of Missouri at Kansas City, UMKC, and did that during the 80s. And at that time, I started to have an interest in using random number generators in the investigation of haunted houses. And but I needed a team to do this investigation with, and I went to a Paracon that was held here in Kansas City, and lo and behold, Dan and his group were there, and they did a presentation, and they talked about the way they approached their investigations, including what they call cartography, which is the minute by minute logging of every single anomalous event that's reported by any of the researchers. And since what I wanted to do is look for correlations between anomalous output on the random number generators and these kind of experiences that researchers have in haunted houses, I thought, hey, here's a group that is already perfectly attuned to my approach. So I came up to Dan afterwards and got to know him and his team and said, hey, would you be interested in doing something like that? And he said, oh yeah, I'd be interested in doing something like that. So it was just a match made in heaven, and it's just been super fun ever since then. So that's how I quote fit in.
Well,
Thank you, Mike.
And I love it. And Mike, I've always wanted to have a parapsychologist on my show. And I've actually, ever since the first time I heard about parapsychology, I think it was Duke University or Chapel Hill was doing something years ago. And
Sure.
that's always fascinated me. So thank you.
They were very famous for the Rhine. J.B. Rhine was located there, and his foundation. He started it at Duke University, but then moved out to a separate foundation. And they were the ones who, of course, broke all kinds of barriers in terms of proving that ESP and PK and clairvoyance and all that kind of stuff really does have scientific evidence that supports it by using the ESP test cards and so forth.
Right. I remember reading some of those studies as a child.
Yep.
Because I've just always been fascinated. So anyway, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure.
I feel like the circus master of like a 3-ring circus with so many people on my show, and I'm loving this. But let's go, Lisa. I want to hear some more about. So, like, what is your process in your research? Do you like how deep do you dig? Where do you look? How do you find a location? Just a little bit into your method.
Okay. So, well, we all kind of work together on getting the location, and then with the PRI group. Once we get the location identified, then I jump in and I start doing internet searches. I try to go out and use some of my. I'm a vice president of a historical society, sit on the board, and so we, try to use some of the resources that we have available. Sometimes I can get out and go actually to libraries if they're close, but just try to get as much information as possible from as many sources as possible. And the other thing I also do is I try to go on to the genealogical sites and do, once we've identified who the owners of the properties were, who's lived there, if we can get any names, then I'll go on and try to do the lineage for the families and try to get as much information from that. And then that can go, there's other links from that point forward. One of the things that I also like to do is to find out where they're buried. And we have done a couple of I wouldn't say experiments, but it's kind of an experiment. We do try to go and visit the cemetery and pay homage to the past people if it's close to where we're at, and go and just visit and tell them that we're going to be there and that we would appreciate it, and we're trying to be very respectful and we would like to find out more about them and their story. And I think we've had some good success a couple of times with that, with some of the locations. So that's been good too. Try to come up with photographs. If I can come up with photographs, and I will print those off and take them with us and use those as, I hate to kind of use it as a trigger object terminology, but that's kind of what it is. It's a connection device or approach to try to continue to make a little more connection with them. May try to find out if, for instance, if there's somebody medical. I'm a nurse, critical care nurse by training. And so I may try to take my lab coat, my stethoscope, some things like that may seem to help initiate some contact with whoever we can.
And that's pretty smart. And side note, Lisa, I can't wait for you to meet my wife. She is also an RN. She's a hospice nurse, so I think you two would get along amazingly.
Yes,
and
I applaud her. That is one thing that I've worked a lot with death, being in critical care, and I worked with the organ bank for a number of years. So for like 7.5 years, every patient I had was either dead or was in the process of dying. And, so I worked a lot with that and with the families, and it gives you a different appreciation. And I certainly applaud her, because I don't know if I could do that every day of the week. I just don't.
And
special
and she's an empath as well.
Oh my gosh.
Holy cow.
So I don't know. I mean, she's an angel.
I don't know how she handles that. I do need to visit with her, because that was one of the things that I talked about a little bit at Paracon. Was I am very empathic, and I've had this ever since I was little. And when I got into nursing school, I had to learn how to turn it off. And I liken it to a radio, and with an old dial radio, by the way.
Right.
I would turn that dial off, and I turned it off for so long that it's really hard to try to turn that dial back on, and to learn how to kind of fine tune it and get it to where I need it to be. So that's one of the things that I've really been working on. And I was so fortunate to have met Peggy in my paranormal adventures. And we both had then left previous groups, and we contacted each other, and we formed our group. And then we ended up with that going to Paracon and meeting Dan and Scott with PRI. And so we kind of joined as a collective for that. And Peggy's been really, really helpful with me and encouraging with me, offers a lot of encouragement on how to fine tune some of my skills.
Well, and if it's okay with you, I'm going to have my wife reach out via Facebook to you.
Absolutely. That would be fine.
Yeah, she's as she puts it, she's a psychic medium in training.
Right.
You know, but so maybe y'all would have a lot to talk about. Let's go to Scott. Scott, I've got the hard-hitting question for you, brother. Are you ready?
Metallica or Megadeth? No.
I was going to go Star Trek or Star Wars.
Star Wars, definitely, 100%.
Okay, so which one's the best?
My favorite one, Empire Strikes Back.
All right, I knew I liked you for a reason.
So, how old were you when that came out, Scott?
That would have come out in 1980. I was 6.
I wasn't born yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I may look old.
Brandon, one of your viewers had a question. Greg, something. Yeah. Lisa, you're a VIP in Kansas City, right? Was what town?
No, it's actually with the Jefferson County, Kansas Historical Society, and it's out of Oskaloosa, Kansas. And I'm not sure when he's asking for how long, what that means.
I guess how long have you been a member of the historical societies?
The Historical Society, I've been a member for 4 or 5 years. The town that the Historical Society is in, my great grandfather founded.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
yeah.
My family had been in the county for a number of years and then moved to the larger towns next to it. And I've kind of been trying to get back in, and obviously with my interest in genealogy and research, have been doing that. And so that's kind of gotten me back into the interest. It's about an hour away from where I live. I live in a suburb of the greater Kansas City metropolitan area.
And here's another question. And for my viewers, please just jump in with questions, because this is kind of a free form today. But what is Lisa, have you ever used any medical equipment while on investigation? If so, which ones and what types of responses have you received?
So like I said, I've used lab coats, I've used stethoscopes. We've done, I'm trying to think what all we've done. We investigated at a hospital for about 9-10 months, and that was pretty intense. And some interesting things happened there. For that can be a whole show on itself. So I'm trying to think, we've kind of reenacted, we kind of set more scenarios, I think, than actually using medical equipment, but we'll set up scenarios. We're there to make rounds. Are you having any pain? Do you need to do this? And we did ask things like if we made communication through using some ITC, and with that, asking them what it was that they wanted. And the first thing that came out was whiskey. And we were in a dialysis unit, and I'm like, yeah, not so sure that whiskey would be on your diet, and if I could get that approved. But if not, what would be your second choice? And so it was coffee. Then I was, like, coffee. Well, how would you like that? And it was black. And I was like, okay. So I did make sure, it's one of the things that if you promise something, you need to carry through with it. And I think we all have had that. All of us here, at least, have had that experience. And so I did make sure and took coffee the next time, and we did the ITC, and they were very, same people, they were very thankful and that. I have not used any electronic equipment. There was on one of the Ghost Hunters episodes from a year or so ago, there was a gentleman who had repurposed a life pack. One of the defibrillator life packs. And I, of course, just went googly-eyed over that, and I wanted it. So that would definitely be something I would like to have. And that was one that they then used as they put some white, what am I trying to say? A sensory around, so that if it came through, but you could watch it go across on the screen. So that was pretty neat. And I've used that. I I have not done others. I mean, I have some medical equipment still. I have some old medical, like some glass syringes, some things like that but I don't necessarily take those with me because they're actually old and I don't want to utilize those. Now at the Historical Society, we have a medical display, and I did get some K2 hits in there. I did a very, for this one, I did a very brief, informal kind of initial investigation, and I did get some hits back in there around some of the equipment. So that was very interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. And Angel K, we will get to your question in just a
Angel,
second.
Angel's part
Hey,
of our.
hey, Angel.
Scott, back to Scott. Wow, there he is. Okay, so yeah, by the way, Megadeth.
Oh, me too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely Megadeth, yes.
Well, I mean, if you're wild enough to get kicked out of Alcoholica, which was the original Metallica, then and start your own band, and it goes this long, then you're awesome.
Doing something
And
right.
it's so much better.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So in this whole scientific process,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like each of y'all have a specific method, maybe that y'all focus in. So what would be what's your go-to? What is your like specific? This is what I need to do.
Well, aside from the actual investigating in the field, I'm known as the investigative coordinator. I'm usually the guy that sets up where we're all staying and what time everybody's meeting and this and that. I'm very detail oriented.
Some call it OCD.
I am like everything has to be this way and that way, and that's right. It suits well for meeting times and where we're staying. And as far as in the field, I'm not huge. I don't have a ton of equipment. I just purchased a data logger, which you probably know what that is. I usually carry a malimeter. I like that because it measures EMF and temperature changes.
Right.
And a digital recorder to collect EVP samples or possible EVPs. That's basically how I investigate.
Hey, there's something to be said about the old school method of simplicity. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, and I have equipment out the wazoo thanks to Supernatural Inc. But sometimes I just like a good old piece of crap digital recorder, or my favorite is like the mini tape recorder.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the analog.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot to be said about that. So that I think you and I would have a good time investigating together, just doing some old school methods. So that's awesome. I like that.
I mean, I even like the laser grid. I like sitting down in a room and just watching that for 20 minutes just to see if we catch anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And let me see. Angel had a question that I told her we would get back to. Here it is. Oh wait, what exactly? Sean, I am going to get to that question. That was going to be next. That's a very good question. So Angel asked for each of y'all, what is your most memorable experience? Dan, let's start with you, bud.
Oh, let's see. During an investigation or just paranormal related?
That's a good. You know what? Let's just
personal
say
or during an investigation. Is that what you're saying, Dan? Is that the question?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because honestly, some of the craziest stuff has happened when I was doing other things. So that's.
Well, then let's
more interested while we're.
Yeah, while we're investigating. Well, I know you're going to say Beatty. So
I was going to say I'll do the Beatty. Sorry.
We actually have had some really great experiences at Ashmore Estates early on, actually, but before we really, the PRI was kind of a glimmer. We did a private investigation down there, and it was before Ashmore had really been, cleaned up and tuned up and sort of turned into the Paranormal Hilton. It was pretty rough at the time. And we were up, there was 5 of us up on the 3rd floor, which was the criminally insane floor. And it's about 4 o'clock in the morning?
3:30, 4. Yep.
And so we're walking down the hall and we're all tired and we're kind of joking around. And all of a sudden, we all at the same time had the panic reaction, that I need to run out of here right now. And So we've always been big into, instead of running out, we just log it and kind of push through it. And so we did that. And, we're waiting, we were looking around to see if we saw anything like that. And all of a sudden we heard all this tapping on the windows. And, we're on the third floor and there was something clearly banging on the windows. So it was a little disconcerting. And walked over and we looked at the window and there was a swarm of bats and they were literally circling around, flying and hitting the window, bouncing off.
Oh wow.
And so that was a very intense moment right then, just because it was so against the laws of nature for him to be hitting this 3-story building like that. So so we did some investigations with ultrasonic, results, things like that. So that was probably my most intense moment. Well, next to Beatty, but Scott wants to talk about that.
Yeah, my most intense experience was at the Beatty Mansion in St. Joseph, Missouri. We were there with Mike and Brandy was down there, and Laura Snotterly. Anyway, while we were upstairs, we all heard a woman screaming like you do in a horror movie. It sounded like a damn horror movie. And me being the skeptical person, I immediately thought it was Brandy. I'm like, I radioed down, Brandy, did you just scream or laugh or something? And she said no. At that point, I'm looking for speakers in some of the rooms, like up in the corners, because, I'm skeptical in nature. A lot of stuff doesn't really happen to me as often as some other investigators. Right. I kind of have to see it for my own self before I believe it. And we couldn't disprove it, put it that way. We couldn't say it was an actual person in that building, a human form.
Which actually the Beatty investigation is the one that the paper is based on.
Yeah. So yeah, we all know what an EVP is. It's a sound that's picked up on a recorder after we ask a question, right? Well, this was heard live. So for my eyes, it freaked me out to the point where if this isn't somebody in the building, I just heard a ghost audibly with my own ears.
Right.
To me, I was, Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm like, this is why I'm in this field.
Exactly. Disembodied voices, they catch you off guard, man. And they're just like, wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But anyway,
that's creepy.
Thank you.
Let's Lisa, what about you?
I have been trying to think while they've been talking. I've had so many things happen that I'm trying to think of the most memorable. I've had, I would say probably during an investigation, it would be at that hospital that I walked in. I was the only person inside the building at that point, and I'd gone in to go to the bathroom, and we had like a little makeshift because the place had been shut down. There was no water, no electricity, no anything there. So we had a little like camp bathroom that I'd set up, and I walked in, and of course, every time that I walk in somewhere, it's always like, "Hello, I'm here," "Hi, it's Lisa, I'm back," or "I'm here," or it's nice to, please. And that's why I introduced myself. I'm walking into somebody else's place. I'd like to announce myself. And I was coming out and my name was called from down the hall, and it actually came from the laboratory. And I was like, "Hello?" And I thought it was one of our team members. And then I walked outside and every single person was outside and not one person had called my name. So that was kind of an interesting one. But I've been touched. I've had disembodied voices. I've had somebody, they either, I don't know if you want to say channel jumped, whatever, but that or gave me a super giant bear hug. There's just been all kinds of different things and equipment interactions. I would say personally, one of the most memorable, one of my first true, I've had experiences since I was a very little child, like two years old, probably. I remember my first memory is from 6 months. My next memory is from about 2 years. So, but after my dad died, I was having a real kind of a struggle with that, and I was in my room kind of crying about the whole thing.
Right.
It had been a few weeks, and I turned around and he was standing there.
Mm.
And so that was my first, like, nobody can tell me that I'm not, it's something else. It's street lights. I'm imagining it. My dad was standing right there.
Right.
And shortly after that, when I was at college, I was moving into the dorm, and I was the first person in the dorm on our floor. And I made sure of that after this happened. So I was going in and out, moving stuff back and forth. It was after Christmas break. So I was moving some stuff back in, and it was cold. It was winter. I was in Manhattan, Kansas, and I was looking for my gloves, and I couldn't find my gloves anywhere. And I'm like, whoever took my gloves, bring my gloves back. And, like, I want them back right now because it's cold.
Right.
And I went outside and got some stuff, and I came back and my gloves were there. And I was like, and this stuff had been happening my entire life. And I grew up as an only child in the house. I had half siblings or step siblings that, were not at the house with me the majority of the time. And this stuff happened all the time. And it was my mom and I, my dad traveled, and Mom, did you take? And she'd be like, why would I take that? No, I haven't been in your room. So,
right.
Stuff like that had happened. And then it would reappear exactly where I'd been looking for it. So, that was kind of interesting. And then I had an actual disembodied voice along with that when I was like, who is this? And
right.
They spoke to me. So those were my two probably first truly memorable personal experiences that couldn't be explained any other way.
Well, especially that one with your dad there. That had to be pretty. I don't know what the word is. Calming.
It was
scary, calming, reassuring.
Yeah, that was reassuring. It's kind of interesting because there were other things that had happened that week in the house. We had two dogs that fought all the time, and I heard a noise, and I went around we had a sliding door, and we had a Charlie bar, and I was home by myself, and so I'd had the Charlie bar down, and everything was locked. And when I came back around, the Charlie bar was up, the sliding door is open, the screen door is open, and these two dogs that the one tries to kill the other one because she had epilepsy all the time, try to attack her, and they're just standing there looking at each other, not moving at all. And that was very weird. And then I would have electronics come back on after I'd turn them off and leave the room. I'd come back and they'd be back on again. And so there was different things like that. And then I would go through the entire house to make sure nobody else had somehow gotten in and nobody was there. And so it was, different things like that kept happening as well after my dad died. And then my dad appeared. So I don't know. It was crazy.
And you saying that you were an only child, that's kind of, I'm an only child as well.
Me too.
And see, I'm wondering, can we do some sort of case study on paranormal activity, psychic ability in only children?
Or raised as an only child.
Or raised as an only child. Because it seems like, from people that I've talked to, there's a lot of only children or their siblings were much older that are in paranormal. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's just kind of
interesting.
Yeah.
Mike, are you aware of any studies?
That's a Mike question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I didn't say anything. What was the question?
Because this is up your alley. And then I had a viewer that had a question.
Oh.
Are there any case studies out there of only children and a connection with psychic abilities or paranormal
an interest in paranormal?
Right. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Not to my knowledge. I myself am an only child, and or as Snoopy once said, I'm an only dog. Anyway, but I haven't had that many psychic experiences happen to me, so I'm probably the other side of the fence on this one. I'm interested. Like I said, I've always been interested in it ever since I was quite young, devoted to it, in fact. But as far as personally having experiences, not so much. So and to answer your question, I really don't know of any study that's been done on that.
maybe we can, that'll be something that we can discuss offline. I would love to. I'd love to do that. And then the question, Mike, from Sean is, what exactly is parapsychology?
Oh, well, parapsychology is the study of all kinds of psychological elements that fall outside of what would be called normal psychology. The field actually started way back in the 1800s. Well, yeah, actually, parapsychological kinds of experiments can be traced all the way back to ancient Greece and so forth. But back in the 1800s, it got on an academic footing, and it at that time was called psychical research. And it was basically a response to a religious movement that was current at the time called spiritualism, which had swept this country. We were talking about the Fox sisters a little earlier, had swept this country first and then gone to England and then Europe and swept all over Europe. And the basic premise of that was that when a person dies, some part of their whatever you want to call it, their soul, their spirit, their Atman, whatever, it continues into the next world, their consciousness, their personality. And furthermore, spiritualists, I should probably be more proper and say spiritists, believe that they can communicate with the spirits of those who have died, who are now discarnates. And there were a lot of people making extraordinary claims, like the Fox sisters and H.H. Holmes and D.D. Holmes and Eusapia Palladino and a lot of other famous psychics at the time. And a group of scientists at Trinity College, Cambridge, decided to investigate whether their claims were true, tried to come up with actual experiments. It was field research, but it was controlled experiments that would try to see if some of their claims held water. And in doing so, they formed the first academic group called the Society for Psychical Research in 1882. And that eventually led to the birth of the American Society for Psychical Research in 1884, which was headed up by philosopher William James. And by the way, the people who were most involved in these early groups were the leading lights of their time in terms of their academic standings. We're talking about Nobel laureates, members of the Royal Society in England, a whole slew of physicists and philosophers and astronomers, like in France, Camille Flammarion, people like that. These were the great thinkers of their day, but they were all, and famous writers too, like Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, all interested in this kind of work. And at that time, it was called psychical research. After a while, they realized that a lot of what these mediums were reporting could be explained by communication with discarnate spirits, but it might also be explained another way. It might also be explained through telepathy with living people, or say clairvoyance, or which are other paranormal faculties that had already been pretty much proven. And so another group of researchers tried to figure out, okay, well, what are the limits of clairvoyance, telepathy, PK, and things like that? And they started doing laboratory experiments. You mentioned Dr. Ryan earlier at Duke University. And well, this is one of the places where psychical research started to give way to parapsychology, where no longer were experiments being done in the field, but all the experiments were being done in the lab with like the ESP test cards and so forth, to try to figure what are the limitations of these things. Because if mediums can get their information through telepathy with living people, there's no reason to resort to an explanation that they're discoursing with dead people. So that's where parapsychology stayed for a very, very long time. and kind of avoided field research. In fact, it's only more recently that parapsychology has started taking an interest in field research again. Field research is messy, very messy. It's hard to control it. It's hard to put controls around it,
Right.
and so forth, and to collect data that's unimpeachable, that, because there's so many variables in play in any kind of field research situation. It's hard to control that. So anyway, that's where we're going now, is trying to make strides into that area of bringing controls to field investigation.
Yeah, and we had many, many, many hours of discussion trying to figure out exactly how to do it. And we probably spent, 10, 12 hours on the phone, Mike, don't you think, trying to lay out the initial experiments and how we were going to do them?
Oh, at least. And it took weeks before we really had the experimental protocol down to the point where it would pass muster with everybody. A minute ago, you were asking everybody what their most memorable experience in this
Right,
field
yes.
was. I didn't even have to think twice about it. And this will probably underscore the difference between somebody who approaches this field as a paranormal researcher and somebody who approaches it as a parapsychologist, because easily my most memorable experience is after we did the Beatty Mansion investigation, which was, I was not yet a member of PRI at that time, but I was working with them because they were the group that I had already talked to Dan, and we figured out this approach. And our whole idea was, and which we'll, I know, talk about more as the program goes on, but our whole idea was to try to get a correlation between anomalous events from the random number generator and reports of paranormal events happening in the haunted house from our researchers, to see how often those two things clustered together in time, right? And when we had collected all the data, I sent it to another friend of mine that I'd been kind of coordinating with, who I'm talking to about how to approach this. His name's Dave Schumacher, and I loved the fact that he was an independent researcher. So this didn't come from PRI or me. It came from somebody else who is really good at statistics, especially probability statistics. And his initial thought when I told him my idea for the experiment is, oh, no, you're not going to have anything statistically significant as a result of these experiments. And we can get into this later, but statistical significance is usually in science quoted at what's called a p-value of 0.05, which means there's about one chance in 20 that the occurrence would happen by chance. I got on the phone after Dave did the initial analysis, and he said, you have a p-value of 0.00001, which means, in layman's terms, there was about one chance in 100,000 that we would have gotten our results by chance alone. That was the moment that was the most memorable for me in all my days.
I like it.
No question. I was on cloud nine for weeks after that.
Minsky's every night.
And that's quite a good segue, because I wanted to kind of switch over to, let's talk more about the scientific approaches that you guys are using. I know Dan and I talked about the random event generators a little bit and stuff like that, but I'm ignorant to it all and to this approach, and I would like to learn more. So let's dig a little bit deeper into like the scientific side. So let's talk. Yeah,
if I may defer to Dan to begin with, to have him talk a little bit about the concept of evidence stacking, which is the phrase he used in the lecture, which I first attended at Paracon, and it's what made my ears prick up when I heard it.
Okay.
And then we'll get back to me.
Certainly.
So basically, evidence stacking, it's one of the things that I love seeing in an investigation. It's where you have disparate types of equipment that confirm the same results. And so, conceptually, you have a medium walk through and say, little Timmy's in the corner. And then you pick up an EVP of a ball bouncing and maybe a child laughing. And then, you pick up a tiny shadow figure, et cetera, et cetera.
High EMF, whatever.
Yeah. And so the different ways, and so the REG actually is just a baseline way for us. But when it correlates with evidence stacking, then you have a pretty darn good idea that something is actually going on. And, I should probably preamble that with the PRI right at the moment. We're not trying to confirm or deny the existence of ghosts. We decided to go on a very step-by-step method and prove the existence of something. So we don't try and classify it. We don't say it's a ghost, it's a demon, it's a spirit, it's an anything. There is a paranormal anomaly that is happening, and we can prove it. And so that was step one as far as I was concerned, because no one had ever been able to actually prove. I mean, it had always been kind of empirical evidence or, perceived evidence. Yeah, this place is haunted. And so the initial goal was to just say, yes, there is paranormal or not normal activity happening in this location. And so I think that's where sometimes people get a little confused because they're like, oh, you can prove ghosts. I'm like, well, no, we can prove that there's statistical anomalies that prove there's something out of the ordinary.
Right. And
and that's good enough for us.
well, it seems to me that you've got to have a very good base before you can build on anything, and that seems like that's let's just prove that there's something going on.
Exactly.
And then you can build from there.
Right, and that's really why I had decided to start the Paranormal Research Institute, because I had observed I'd actually worked with several ghost groups and things like that, and it always seemed like it was one of those, you go into a house, something happens that triggers your reactive instinct, and then you try to fit the story to the event. So it kind of went from A to B to Z. And, the rake fell off the wall. So it's old Mr. Perkins, who was the groundskeeper. And this just never made sense to me. And so it was, let's try to go A to B to C, and then, potentially D and E and F and on down the line. But no one had ever done that. It was never my intent to start the PRI. I just finally did out of frustration because nobody had done that before. So.
It was Professor Plum with the candlestick in the library.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was.
That's interesting because I kind of, we've talked about it and we say, for instance, I led one of the ghost tours last night at Alexander Major's house and communicating with, and it was like, well, that's who they represent themselves as, that's the information. Right. When we're getting it and it's coming through, and as a psychic, I'm not getting the sense that it is somebody impersonating them at that point. So, can I prove it? No, I can't. But every sense about me is confirming that. And I try to use some of the research and information that I have to ask those questions. And that was one of the things I was trying to show the groups that I was leading the last couple of days. That's what I try to do. You take the information you have, you ask potentially, you ask some questions, then you ask wrong questions to see if you get a yes or no answer to that. And then you go and you ask more correct, what you know for facts, and do they confirm it or not? So that's one of the things and tools that I like to use as well, amongst all of the devices that we use.
Right.
And if I could just interject for a second, that's that's one of the cool things about the REG is it's not dependent on anything. It just runs as a stream in time. And so by using this methodology, you can then use all kinds of different types of investigation. And so when we're doing an investigation, there's no one perceived evidence that's more important or more anything than another. It's about the perception of, the perceived paranormal experience. And if that correlates with the REG is really the definition we're looking for right now.
This is Mike, and I better interject that REG
Yeah, go ahead.
and RNG are synonyms. REG stands for a random event generator, and that tends to be the phrase used more in scientific literature. And RNG, for random number generator, is the phrase used in slightly less scientific literature. So,
Got it.
so yeah, we just had our first, as was alluded to earlier, we had our first major publication about one of our experiments. Oh,
Awesome.
look who's
Awesome.
holding it up right there.
There it is.
Our lovely model, Lisa.
I will be Vanna this evening.
Okay, is modeling an article that I wrote.
Oh, there it is.
Chance of a ghost.
I'll buy a
It's
vowel, please.
all about probability. Because the question comes down to, okay, you know, all of these claims about there's a spirit like little Timmy sitting in the corner. If
the popular guy with us.
or a medium sees that spirit or has that experience, what proof is there beyond their own subjective experience? Can we actually collect scientific data? Can we quantify this somehow?
Right.
So I got the idea of using a random number generator or RNG to do this, and the way I got this idea, let me back up and just talk a little bit about what inspired it. There was a scientific experiment that lasted for many years. In fact, it's still ongoing, called the Global Consciousness Project.
I've heard of that.
Yep. It was run by the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, or PAIR Laboratories, under the direction of Roger Nelson. And what Nelson did was to set up RNGs in mostly in university settings all over the world, and to monitor them to see if they would stay on track. Now, what does a random number generator do? Well, just what its name implies. It sits there cranking out a constant data stream of zeros and ones that are totally random, absolutely random. And there are various scientific methods or statistical methods of looking at the data stream to see if, in fact, it is random or whether it is veered into the area of non-randomness. That is to say, it starts evincing patterns of some sort, maybe way more zeros or way more ones than there should be. You know, it'd be like somebody flipping a fair coin and it comes down, 70 times in a row heads. You'd probably ask that guy to see that coin, right?
Exactly.
It's got two heads on it.
Exactly. So we know that, that we can measure those data streams for being random or non-random. Well, what the Global Consciousness Project did was to ask the question: if there is something truly large happening on the world stage that suddenly commands everybody's attention, and everybody suddenly is focusing their concentration, their consciousness on one thing. Normally people go about their day, doing all kinds of stuff. It's chaos. Some people are grocery shopping, some people are watching TV. But what happens when suddenly the whole world is looking at a single thing? Would that cause, or would that have a correlation with random number generators suddenly ceasing to be chaotic or random and suddenly to have a bit of coherence in what they're doing? They're suddenly more focused because everybody's consciousness on the planet is suddenly focused. Well, they set up this experiment and they started having results. For example, they had results. I think one of the first ones was in the O.J. Simpson case. When the verdict was read, people all over the world were watching that. And suddenly random number generators all over the world went off the beam and started showing patterns that were no longer random. It happened again during Princess Diana's funeral. And of course, the parade example of it happening were the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Suddenly, they got their biggest data spike, and it's fun to go onto their website and take a look at that because it's just way off the charts.
It's fascinating.
All of these random number generators are suddenly veering. They're suddenly creating patterns. They're no longer random. And the interesting thing is, they start to go off the beam 2 hours before the first plane hit the first tower.
Huh. Okay.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, and it's interesting in looking at their data on the Global Consciousness Project with their pods around the memorials each year for the 9/11 have triggered spots as well.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
It's amazing.
There have been lesser triggers as well. So we know these kind of things happen, and my I guess inspiration was that an improbable event like the terrorist attacks of 9/11, I mean, that doesn't happen every day, so it's highly improbable that it would happen on any given day,
Right.
suddenly correlates with all of these random number generators going off track at the same time. That's highly improbable. So what about scaling down this whole effort and taking a random number generator into a haunted house and seeing if there is a correlation between when the random number generator starts generating anomalous data streams and when the researchers in the haunted house are reporting paranormal events? Maybe somebody reports seeing little Timmy sitting in the corner. Well, that report by itself, is not really, that will convince the person that sees little Timmy, but it's not very convincing to anybody else.
Right.
Like my dad. I mean, there's no way I could tangibly
Right.
prove that.
So, but suddenly it becomes a lot more evidential if at the same time the researcher says, I see a little boy sitting in the corner. At the same moment, within 3 minutes, we had to operationally define how close. So within 3 minutes of that, the random number generator goes off beam significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically the basis of now this first article that we had published was written only after our first investigation, but we have successfully replicated that in 2 more investigations, the McIntyre Villa and the Garnett House. So we have 3 now altogether investigations where we have done the statistical analysis, where Dave Schumacher has done the statistical analysis for us. And we are so far above what just chance alone would allow for. It's astronomical. So to me, that really bolsters the evidential weight of any researcher who says, I just had all the hairs on my arms stand up, or I just felt like I walked into a cold spot or whatever. And suddenly the RNG goes ping.
Well, and if I can interject on that, when you're in an investigation and you actually have that experience and then the RNG goes off, it really cements the experience in a way that I've never even fathomed before. It's like, holy cow, I'm not crazy. Mm-hmm. This just happened. This is a real thing. And that perspective on the investigation is really can't even describe it.
And what's really interesting here is that the RNG is not any kind of apparatus that is detecting anything physical or tangible in the immediate proximity. In other words, it doesn't have any external facing sensors. It's not like an EMF meter or anything like that. It's not measuring anything in the environment. All it's doing is cranking out random numbers. And yet, the results correspond significantly to a high degree of significance with the experiences that our researchers are having during their investigations. And I think that's a breakthrough.
Well, and so what is the theory behind what is causing these?
I'm so glad you asked that. I have absolutely no idea.
Okay. Me either.
We in science we often say, you know, we can assert correlation without causation. We don't know I don't even know if causation is the applicable word here. Does an RNG going off the beam cause a paranormal event? I doubt it. Does a paranormal event cause an RNG to go off the beam? Maybe, but we don't have any direct you know, there's no underlying theory as to what the physics of that would be. All we can say is that we know it happens. We know it's real. We know it's happening, and you know, maybe down the line we'll find ways to structure some kind of experiments that will help shape that and help prove that. But right now, we don't know. Maybe both of them, the RNG and the experience of the researcher, maybe they're both responding to a third hidden variable. That's always possible. We don't know.
And you know, the way I've always kind of put it is when the REG does that, RNG, whatever you want to call it, when it does that, basically for that brief moment, we're in many ways, we really are, we're experiencing reality breaking.
Yeah.
And so that's the best way I can put it, is we're watching and we're metering reality breaking as we're having an experience.
I've always liked,
I mean, would it fall into probably the quantum category where, you know,
possibly?
You know,
We don't know for sure, but possibly, because we do have RNG experiments that were done by a parapsychologist named Dean Radin, that who's probably my favorite of all the parapsychologists out there today, doing some really cutting edge stuff, where he had people watching through viewers to see, you know, the classic double slit experiment in quantum physics, where after something is observed, it collapses the waveform and it's either waves or it's particles. Well, you can do that by having somebody look at it directly, or you can do that by having a bunch of people psychically look at it. So, you know, they're using clairvoyance, in other words, and it still collapses the wave package. So that is freaking amazing. You know,
that's fascinating.
I know, right? And so we know these things are possible, and we know that the RNGs also react at those same moments. So it's possible something is happening at the quantum level. Yeah, good question.
And just so my viewers know, we are going to go over. We usually do an hour show, but there's way too much information to pack into 1 hour. So we will be so we will be going over. So, you know, stay with us or watch later or feed the kids or wash the cat or whatever. But this is some great stuff we got going on here.
Well, considering that when we all talked a couple of weeks ago, this went on for hours.
Right.
You know, Dan,
days actually.
Dan was giving one kind of metaphorical look at how we view the RNG. My metaphor is to say that if you could create an instrument that would actually measure a disturbance in the force, this would be
it.
Yeah, I like it. So,
Luke,
I want to say something, because Carol posed a good question. Are they ghost spirits, souls, or something else? And I don't know what others think. I think sometimes those are used interchangeably, and sometimes that could be different. I don't know. Brandon, what's your take? I wanted to address Carol's question because I thought it was a great one.
Yeah, that is a good one. I had seen that one, and I'm glad that you came back to it. You know, they're so, like, nowadays they're so interchangeable, and it's almost like they've lost their meaning, because, you know, at one point they were all individual
ghost spirit
entities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you know, some people would say like a spirit is non-human, could, like, elemental maybe. A ghost would correlate with a human entity.
And it
Oh,
might have been a earthbound. They hadn't been able to cross. They were in trouble. But is that also a troubled soul? You know, so there's, yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question, and I don't know that there's any one right answer per se. I think you're going to get a lot of different interpretations with that. Dan or Scott, did you have any? Mike?
You know, the only thing I can say about that, and I know you've heard me say it 1,000 times, Lisa, and I know Mike has and everything, is I try really hard not to believe in any one thing, because as soon as you believe it's one way, you close your mind to all the other possibilities. So I make a decided effort to not believe in anything.
I'm a little different. I'm a little different in that I was born and raised Catholic, so that gives you a little bit of my background. I do believe in the existence of ghosts. That's what I call them. Whether it's a positive, negative, I don't like to use the word demon.
Right.
I've never seen one. I probably hope I don't. But you know, entity, spirit. You know, being from a Catholic background, that's the terminology that I choose to use.
Yeah, I mean, usually I'll use entity just because it's kind of the generic catch-all.
Right.
You know, a free forming intelligence, basically.
Right. I don't know if it's human or elemental or whatever, earthbound or not, or what portal based. I don't know.
Right.
I might just interject that I think that for a long time, people have been using the word ghost as kind of an umbrella term. There are a lot of different things that fall under ghost, from everything from apparitions to poltergeist activity, which, as we know from the work of parapsychologist William Roll, poltergeist activity is probably more linked to living agents than they are to deceased agents. So a lot of times there's a teenager that seems to be the focal agent in poltergeist activity. A lot of times there's stress-related things going on psychologically with the poltergeist agent. So there could be a lot of different things that we mean. Some people believe that there's this area in parapsychology called psychometry, where people seem to be able to leave impressions on objects. And they could pick up an object and they can sense things about that object's former owner, for example. Well, in this case, we might have a whole house that acts as a psychometric object, and people are picking up, and some people call that stone recorders or whatever. But
the stone tape theory, yes.
Stone tape, that there's some kind of psychic impression left on the space of the house itself, and maybe that's what we're picking up. We just don't know enough yet to know what we're picking up, but we're picking up something anomalous. That's the main thing.
Right. I've always raised a question, and this is a loaded question, but say a group of 8 is walking through a quote unquote haunted location. They're all focused on one side of a room. 4 see an apparition and 4 do not.
And that's happened.
Why is that?
And that has happened. That's in the literature over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know.
Are 4 people tuned in and 4 people are tuned off? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the first place that I would go in my thought process, well, okay, now we got to see what each person was thinking about at that exact moment, Yeah.
There was a time when people thought that, okay, when you have what's called collective percipience, which is where multiple people are all viewing the same paranormal event, that added to the evidential weight of that experience. So maybe, let's say 4 of your 8 people are seeing it, not just 1, but 4 of your 8 people are seeing it. Okay, well, that seems to add to the weight of it, unless you factor in telepathy. Well, then maybe it's possible that only 1 person is having the experience and 3 more are kind of piggybacking onto their experience because they're in a psychologically charged state. They're in this haunted house. They're keyed up, and telepathy may be flying between them. So maybe they're just picking up what the first person saw, quote, quote.
Or maybe.
Right. Oh.
We could debate that. We could debate that topic till the sun comes up.
How many hours you got?
Right. And do the cows ever come home?
Yeah, they haven't for us.
Yes, they do.
I keep waiting. Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, okay. So you were you had mentioned that the RNGs correlated around 9/11. Could that possibly have something to do with the singular of consciousness theory, where we all share the same consciousness?
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, but you have to understand here that we're talking about moving from a chaotic state, and this is both in terms of human consciousness and in terms of the RNG, moving from a chaotic state to a more coherent state,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And so they obviously are reflecting one another. So yeah, it's and
Are you
it's,
going to
it's
quote Nietzsche, Mike?
sorry.
I said, are you going to quote Nietzsche?
No, I'll try to avoid.
Oh, go ahead now.
But the question is, I mean, even in our investigations, let's say we do have a researcher report something anomalous, like they see a shadow figure or whatever, or even maybe they see an object movement, and at the same time the RNG goes off. Well, who knows again what the underlying mechanism of that is? Is it because there really was a shadow figure or an object really did move? Or maybe it's the researcher's emotions. I mean, here's a
Right.
researcher who is in a dark room reacting to an object moving on its own. And that's, there's got to be a huge pulse of energy from that researcher telepathically or whatever. Maybe that's what's causing, the anomalous reading from the RNG. We just don't know. It could be coming from the phenomena itself. It could be coming from the researcher. It could be coming from me because I'm sitting there at base camp hoping that our researchers' experience and the RNG will go off at the same time. Maybe I am somehow using psychokinetic ability to affect it. I don't know. All I know at this point is that it's working.
Right. Well, and to that note, I mean, we are actually looking for other groups to test this methodology because it works for us. We can't say 100% that it will work for somebody else.
Right.
Yeah. I want to see different.
And so that runs into a whole conundrum because you have to find a group that will actually, reliably follow the methodology that we've come up with. And, to make it a true experiment, we can't really be there while they're doing it. And so there's a lot of faith and a lot of trust involved in that type of thing too.
And I need to take a soda break real quick. Does anybody else need a drink? Or
Yeah, you can bring me one if you want.
I'll take a Dr. Pepper.
I will be right back.
I've been drinking the whole time, so.
I do have to. Speaking of which, I can do some water.
Anyway, while he's taking
I
a
got a call.
break,
At least for me, not for.
Yes, I'm listening,
Right.
Carl.
I'm listening, Carl.
I always
awfully quiet, Carl.
break and stuff. But now, Mike, how did you create your random generator, your number generator?
I just ran out of my bottled water.
Created it in the sense of creating a software application that I wrote myself that would basically do what we were talking about earlier in terms of statistically analyzing the data stream as it comes through for anomalous output. And I based it simply on the old idea that was first used at Duke University of 100 coin tosses. And you would figure that in 100 coin tosses, you would get about 50 heads and 50 tails. There's something called standard deviation. So you wouldn't always raise an eyebrow if you got maybe 56 heads in a run of 100 coin tosses. But when it starts to go like up to 75, 80 or something like that, you know that your RNG, your random number generator, has gone off the beam. And at that point is when the RNG, and we run this software program, by the way, on an LG Aristo phone, which we're simply using as a portable computer, handheld computer. And at that point, whenever it goes past the threshold limit, it immediately flashes the screen to let the researcher know. It tells you how many zeros as opposed to how many ones were logged on that particular run of 100. It lets you know which run chronologically it was from the very first run, like this happened on your 257th run, say. And it does, most importantly of all, it does a time and date stamp. That, because that is critical. That's what we use to compare when we look at our log and see when other researchers have reported their anomalous experience. And if it's within 3 minutes of one another, and sometimes the RNG hit comes first, sometimes the paranormal event occurs first. But if they're within 3 minutes of each other, that's considered a hit. Now, we can also have, right? We can also have, this is all, I don't know how much people want to go into the statistical part of this, but the analysis is called a chi-square analysis for the independence of variables. And so the two variables we're looking at, obviously, are the RNG going off the beam, which we call an RNG event, and somebody reporting something anomalous in the haunted house, which we call a paranormal event. And when those two variables occur within 3 minutes of each other, we have a hit. Now, there can obviously be other, we have to break the entire night's investigation, like typically 6 or 7 hours worth, into 1 minute chunks or 1 minute segments. And then we look at each 3 minute grouping. There can also be 3 minute groupings where we have a paranormal event, but no RNG event, right? We can have, so that's a miss. That's not a hit. That's a miss. We can have a 3 minute segment where there is an RNG event, but no corresponding paranormal event.
Okay.
That's a miss. And we can have what is actually the greatest part of our night, and that's a 3 minute segment where there is neither an RNG event nor a paranormal event. So this forms basically what's called a 2x2 contingency table, or you might think of it as a little 2x2 square in an Excel spreadsheet, right?
Okay.
So and you plug in the numbers. There are actually online calculators that will do this, and that will calculate based on each of those four conditions: paranormal event and RNG event, no paranormal event, no RNG event, or neither. And you plug those numbers into those four Excel cells, and it will calculate for you the p-value of your A cell, basically your A1 cell. And that's how we know that in the Beatty Mansion experiment, which we reported on in this first article in the magazine of the Society for Psychic Research, that we got odds of 100,000. Think of that, 100,000 to 1 against chance. Now, in science, they usually figure that anything lower than 20 to 1 against odds against chance is statistically significant. So pharmaceutical trials and things like that use that 20 to 1 against chance when they're actually determining whether or not a new drug actually does what it says it's supposed to do. We're so far beyond that. It's mind-boggling.
That's so amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I seen it down at the Joplin Paracon when they were showing the number generator. And I was like, that is just so interesting. And I've had you on shows before talking about it. It's still amazing to me.
It is to me too.
I'm
Well,
glad
thank you.
we can get back
Thank you, Carl.
to the show and everything. We'll talk to you guys later.
I can actually show, I haven't had the luxury of letting Mike see our slide presentation that we developed to do at Paracon, but I can bring up a slide of the RNG.
Oh, okay.
Yes, please.
Display. Let me see if I can get it large enough so that, and then I'll flip it around here.
That way your audience can see what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I hope that's
there it
not
is.
backwards.
All right.
No, we got.
No, it's right side up.
Right.
With all of my 1,000 notifications there.
So in the upper left-hand corner, you see the date stamp when the program was first turned on. You see the
Right.
timestamp following that,
Mhm.
and you see that our we actually use a 15 means that we're using a deviation of 15 points from the mean as the trigger point for, or a threshold point for causing an event to log an RNG event. And the word logging means that it's creating an internal log file on the computer itself, or on, in this case, on the phone itself. And so then we look at event number 1, which occurred at 8 o'clock, 2 minutes and 46 seconds. It occurred on run number 39 sequentially that we had that night. Zeros were at 68, ones were at 32. Wow. So that, you know, the odds against that of happening are very, very low. And so that flashes the screen and prints that. And each one of these lines are the next event. And so through the entire investigation, it tells you at the very bottom we had 12 RNG events. The total number of runs there was 6,586, and we closed the file at 22:02:19, and at the hours were number 13, or actually 1 o'clock, because it doesn't roll over, and 42. 13 I'm sorry, the hours were 13:00 minutes 42 seconds. So all of that data is right there on the screen for you, and it logs it to an internal file, so it's captured. No possibility of the researcher screwing up and writing something down wrong. It's
Right.
all automated.
That's incredible.
Thank you,
Thank
Lisa.
you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then we have a question to Dan and Scott. Are you using the same or different paranormal researchers in a control group during the RNG session?
Good question.
So for the first three, for the big three that we were talking about, the highly documented ones, we tried to keep the variables down as much as possible. I think we might have had 2 different researchers.
So I'd say Laura Snodderly's group was only with us at Beatty.
Yeah. So we did have some variance in people, but we tried to keep the numbers the same and everything like that as much as we possibly could.
That's
ultimately,
awesome.
of course, ultimately we want to have totally independent researchers do the same, replicate the same experiment with totally different equipment as well. We want people, there are various kinds of random number generators out there, and we would like people to use different kinds as well to make sure we're not, you know, there's not some artifact that we're missing. I don't think there could be, personally, but
Right.
you know, we won't know that. We've got to have proof of the pudding. So
And so we're talking about the article. Where can we find the article? Like, I really want to be able to read this thing.
okay.
Thank you, Vanna.
Our lovely model, Lisa, is modeling the magazine article. It is
Okay.
the magazine of the Society for Psychical Research. This is their 2022 edition, number 5. And right there at the very top, you'll see random number. What does it say? Random number generators and ghost hunting.
By Mike Nichols.
Yes, and yeah, if you flip to the
And then
at the table, yeah, and there's the actual the actual title of the article, the first page of it. It's a 4-page article. Some people find it difficult to get all the way through. I don't know why they've set it up in 3 columns, but that's their
that's magazine style.
that's editorial choice. Currently, we have tried to get hard copies of the magazine, and we're still waiting on word as to exactly how to obtain hard copies. In the meantime, the Society actually distributes PDF files of the magazine. It seems like a lot of different groups now are moving to PDF because they don't have all the expense of printing, paper, all that stuff. But it's a very professionally done magazine because it's done by the Society for Psychical Research, which is the oldest psychical research or parapsychology organization in the world, and it's out of London. So, you know, and I really wanted to be published by them simply because that, you know, that puts us in the same tradition as Sir William Crookes and Arthur Conan Doyle and all the rest.
Right. And that's quite impressive.
Yeah, it is. So, we are going to be making available what is typically referred to in research work as reprints of the article. They will be electronic reprints, and hopefully I will be having that available within this next coming week. I will be posting links to that on my own Facebook page, as well as to the PRI Facebook page and the PRI website. If PRI has a website, I'm not sure.
We're working on that still.
They don't happen one of these days.
Yeah, but at any rate, we will make sure that reprints are available for anybody who does want to do research and reference work with this article.
And just for those that did not get a copy at Paracon and they gave us their names, I still have those, and I will be sending those out or getting those to Mike, and we'll get them sent out. Real time, the real life and real job kind of got in the way in the last couple of
As with all of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's probably worth noting here. I think we kind of alluded to it before, but I don't know if we've ever come out and said it. Research is open to anybody. Anybody that's curious about it is more than welcome to talk to us about it. Everything the PRI does, I mean, it's written in the base rules of the PRI that the work we do is transparent. And so anyone that has any questions, please let us know, and we'll work with you and get you those answers.
Well, and here we have a question. How can we find an RNG to use and get you guys the info?
Hit us up on Facebook would probably be the easiest way, and Mike or Dan or somebody will be able to get back with you, and
Absolutely.
We'll make some connection and talk with you about it.
Yep, because in addition to the RNG itself, you've really got there's a whole...
There is a little bit of a learning curve to it.
Yeah, there's a whole discussion that has to be put around the protocol of how this research actually is conducted. So, yeah.
And that was kind of part of our presentation that we gave at Paracon, was that we go through the cartography and how is the cartography done and kind of what our protocol is. And we'd be happy to share that too. I think that's something that's been kind of a dream of Dan's, is that we can share this and get other people to get on board with what we're doing, so that we have more and more data that we can get.
Right.
Well, and I would like to learn more, because I've got, I think Dan and Scott, you and I talked about this. I have an event coming up in March.
Which we're going to try to make that, actually. So.
Oh, wow. I was going to say that I would like to, do some of the experimentation. However, if you were going to make it, then that's even better. If
we can, for whatever reason, we'll be glad to share it with you, because I would love to see the results from there. One of the things that we discussed early on, and we've tried to make really, really plain, we didn't want people to get the idea that, the REG running was kind of a ghost indicator. We didn't want to, look, the REG hit, the place is haunted. Yeah,
that's what Baggins would say.
That's not at all how it works.
Yeah.
And we wanted to be really clear about that. So, there is a little bit of a learning curve to it.
Well, and I think what Mike had talked about with the Global Consciousness Project, which, I got that from the article that Mike wrote, and then I went out and did some more research, and that is fascinating. And to know that they're doing that around the world, and looking at their database and what, earthquakes and volcano eruptions and plane crashes and just all kinds of stuff that make the hits. The Queen's death, the Queen's funeral.
Yes.
I wanted to go back, and I was disappointed. They started that global.
And the Cubs finally won the World Series.
Project. They started the database
that was a worldwide
after Princess Diana's death, because I was very curious about that, and it started right after that. So it was like in 97 or 98, and at least for their database. And but it's very interesting to go through that database and look and see what all has already.
The show's coming up.
Oh, okay.
What if I could add something, please? I agree with everything about the transparency of what we're doing, but I also would not like Brandon, if someone were to come on your show in 2 months and say that they wrote an article in this Psychical Research magazine and this is their idea and all that. No, it's not. It's in print that it's Mike Nichols and PRI.
Right. Totally understand that point of view completely.
Now, one thing I
this-
should probably say to clear this up is people have actually used, and I only found this out post hoc, it turns out, but it turns out that people have taken random number generators into haunted houses before we did. But their approach was so totally different than the approach I came up with. All they did was take a random number generator into a haunted house, place it there, turn it on, and leave it running overnight and just leave. And then they would come back the next day and pick it up and see if the random number generator went significantly off trail while it was running. And every single team that's done that has gotten results that tended slightly toward significant, but never broke that barrier of actual statistical significance. So they can't say, whereas we're so far above it with our approach, because our approach is very different. We're correlating two things. We're not just using a cumulative score for the RNG. But we're correlating every single RNG run to whether or not it's anomalous and whether or not it's within 3 minutes of somebody having experience. And to me, that was the closest to doing what the Global Consciousness Project was doing, was correlating human experience to what the RNG was doing. So,
which kind of goes back to what I talked about before, the evidence stacking. So that's why I said the REG is kind of like our ultimate baseline for evidence stacking.
To me, if you're living in an REG inside of a home and then leaving and coming back, in my opinion, that's almost, the researchers at that point are using that device as a quote unquote ghost detector.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's what it sounds like.
And that's, I think I'm speaking correctly. That is not what it is.
That's my view of it for sure. And in fact, not only is it not a ghost detector, but one of the things we really wrestled with in the very beginning, and Dan will remember these conversations, is how do you define, we knew what the RNG event was going to be. Okay, that just when the RNG, goes off track. But how do you define a paranormal event? I mean, people have struggled with this. Is a shadow figure a paranormal event, or is only an object movement a paranormal? If an apparition is seen, is it only counted as a paranormal event if more than one person sees it? My God, there were thousands of questions, framed around that, and I was at the point of despair at one point, because I thought, and talking to Dave Schumacher too, we were saying there's no way we can operationally define a paranormal event. So we'll never be able to say this is a paranormal event and this is what's corresponding to our RNG. I was ready to give up. And then one night it suddenly, I had my eureka moment. It was like, how do you define a paranormal event? You don't.
Right.
Hence paranormal.
You simply rely on what is being reported by your researchers as a paranormal event by whatever criteria they are used to using. So what we're really doing is using a behavioral sort of thing to correspond to the RNG. If a researcher has an experience that they deem paranormal enough to press the button on their walkie-talkie and call it into the command post, then that's our measurement point. That's how we define that variable, and that's measurable. We know, so we can, and suddenly the problem was solved. That was a break.
We had kind of talked about that being, whether it's either subjective, being felt, perceived, observed, something by the researcher or the investigator, versus objective, where it was a device triggers or a device measure. And so that was one of the things that we also had talked about, was subjective or objective. It's still something that we would report to base, and they would log that and keep track of that as well.
And the amount of relief I felt when Mike called me at 3 o'clock in the morning and said, it doesn't matter.
I love it.
Finally.
Oh, and let me answer Sean's question. He said, where in March? Sean, the event's going to be in upstate South Carolina. It's going to be at Haygood Mill Historical Site. I will have more info to come, but it's never been investigated. And just by me walking around in it, especially near the petroglyphs, it's very energetic, shall I say? I don't want to say much, but that's where that's going to be, and more details will come out in November.
Little teaser there.
Yeah. Oh, it's
It sounds like a fascinating
Very
location.
excited, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's an amazing place, and I'm surprised that nobody has tried to
South Carolina.
to do this, to like investigate this place before. So it's gonna be amazing. Anyway, okay, back to the science. That's gonna be there in March.
Can you tell how many people we've lost from the show, listening to the show?
Hey,
As we
believe it or not, we have stayed steady.
Oh wow!
I've been noticing that. I
even after the 1 hour normal that I do, we're still steady at around like 10 and up, 9 to 10 and up. So this is.
I've got to say, usually I manage to bore people to death with all these statistics, but
No,
your people are keeping up with it. That's great.
Well,
I
have a great audience, is what it is, and just the simple fact that I mean, who else is out there doing this? This is groundbreaking, and you know, like I don't know, it's completely mind-boggling and so interesting to me, and I'm sure it is for my audience because.
Well, thank you.
We're on the precipice. We are right now on my show. I have the future, you know, I don't know what word, but a future breakthrough in paranormal research, and I'm talking to the people that are on the forefront of it right now.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Yeah, so this
Thank
is
you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, and like I can't. I'm so glad that we met, and I'm not wrapping up the show. I just want to say this. But I'm so glad that I was able to run into y'all and meet, because I know that this is going to be huge in the paranormal world, and I just want to be able to sit back and watch and say, "Hey, I met these guys."
To reiterate what Mike,
together.
to repeat what Mike and Lisa were talking about how many of your viewers have logged off. What I find what we're doing is fascinating. I think I touched about that in the beginning, so I won't repeat everything I just said. But to some people that only want to be entertained or scared, you know, like these haunted houses that pop up in October.
Yes.
Our methods in our investigations could be boring to some.
Yeah.
I have yet to been in a house, Brandon, where I'm getting knives thrown at me and the walls are bleeding, and
I'm still waiting on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Me either. I have had stuff move on me.
Yeah, movement. Yeah. But
You all know what you all
things around you, but
still
I've
haven't
never had
still haven't got that.
you all know what causes balls to bleed, right?
No.
Red paint.
Hemogoblins.
Yes. All right. I'm gonna remember that. That's going on.
Yeah, that's good.
Now your audience will drop.
And there's
You know what? It actually
and the mic drop.
just
I'm
went
done.
up. The audience. It just went up.
A paranormal joke
God.
show.
My wife just came on and said, "Oh wait," she said, "Paranormal dad joke."
Yeah.
So, Anna, if you just joined, apparently Brandon and I say that we need to talk to each other. So
Yes, the two of y'all need to get together. I'm gonna
it's a nurse
connect
thing.
y'all via Facebook.
And Rex is still here.
And
Cool.
Brandon, if I got a question, Brandon, when the show does wrap up, how can we view this show, like the recorded version of it, or somewhere?
Yeah, what I normally do is about 45 minutes after we wrap, I let StreamYard do its thing, and then I upload it to my Shaman Sundays YouTube page. Also, you
So I
can
don't have
find
to have
it
Facebook to
on,
watch it. Yeah.
or you can find it on our the Supernatural Inc. Facebook. You'll be
So
able to go back and watch
if
it.
I don't get Facebook, just go to Shaman Sundays on a YouTube channel.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And on Facebook, we could just grab a link off of that and post it on our own Facebook page, and people
Yes,
can
you
link to
can.
it.
Yep.
Okay,
Mhm.
awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Because
Definitely
I like
post
to
it
know
over
that people
on
can
the-
watch this show even if they aren't watching it live.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's where I get my most views. Is usually the next day because of my time slot.
Yeah.
You know, I get pretty decent, but the next day and the following week I get a lot of hits. So
Good.
yeah,
Oh.
all of my shows stay up on various. I think we're on like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different sites right
Oh,
now
wow.
streaming.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Yeah, so yeah, there's always going to be somewhere to. We are live on 6 locations. Yep.
Thank you, Carl.
And I can send y'all a link off of a Facebook or how to get to the YouTube, and y'all put it up or whatever you want to do. But yeah, this is going to be up for posterity.
Cool.
Cool.
So I have a
Awesome.
question because I can't remember. How many places have we investigated where we've actually done the RNG at this point?
Oh, geez.
Like full analysis RNG?
Not well, I mean where we've run it and we've done the whole cartography and base and we've kept track, but I know we haven't necessarily done all the statistics on everything. I mean, I think Brandy really has, and we need to applaud
Yeah,
Brandy.
So Brandy would answer that question
Yeah.
the best.
Cartographer.
I'm guessing 12 to 14.
Yeah, about a dozen. Yeah.
Because I know we've usually done about 2 to 3 a year over the last few years at least.
Yeah, we average 2 or 3 a year times
Yeah.
4.
And sometimes 4, although
Mhm.
that was when we were doing back-to-back investigations.
Right.
That just was way too draining on everybody. And
Yeah, you talk
I
about
don't
this.
think I think that sometimes the second location kind of didn't get a good,
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think we
A good
did
run.
justice.
Like
because
that,
we
that
were
part,
trying-
my heart just wasn't in it.
it's hard staying up all
Yeah.
night and doing that and doing the investigation and then turning around and doing it again.
Yeah.
Brandon, we're talking about doing like 2 nights in a row, which our group has tried a couple of times, and the second night just doesn't get what it deserves.
No,
Right.
it didn't get my
Well,
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, because people are excited. I don't like doing 2-day back-to-back investigations because you're not going to sleep that night.
Right.
You're not going to get
Not
the rest.
not unless you're staying at a location. I mean, if you're staying at a location like
Well,
the
right.
ball house or whatever, that's different, but trying to do 2 separate ones. But the only reason we've done that before was because the crew from Chicago area came down to the Kansas City area, and then we were trying to pack in as
So
much.
we're trying to pack as much as we could in.
We were
And
trying to put
biggest
a
bang
square
for
hole into a round peg at that point.
Right, and I think we've all done that at one point or another, and it
Yeah,
just
you
doesn't-
did it right this time, Brandon, because you kind of paced yourself over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, for once I got something right.
Well,
You get a lot right.
Well, I got this show right with the great guests. So we're gonna put that up.
Us investigators, we've all heard of a paranormal hangover, right?
Oh
So-
gosh,
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, you haven't been out drinking all night, but you wake up after you've been in a haunted house or whatever a location, and you feel you're drained.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny because I did just the ghost tour. I just did a little over a 2-hour tour on Friday night with a group, along with our other partner who's not here tonight, Peggy. And I had to text her yesterday, and I'm like, man, are you hurting today? Because we did have a lot of activity, but it wasn't crazy, and it wasn't a really long one. But boy, I felt like I had been pulled through a knothole backwards. I just hurt everywhere, and it was crazy.
Oh yeah.
But we had lots and lots of interaction with spirit in a very short amount of time. Every room we went into, there was something happening. So it was really nice for our the clients that had purchased the event.
Right.
But boy, was it psychically draining. And Angel
Well, and
comment about that. And Angel K, just so everybody knows, our she's on PRI, and she is our psychic medium. She does a lot of remotes for us, and unfortunately, she didn't get to come to Paracon a couple weeks ago, but she's really very good and talented, and we appreciate all of her input and contributions as well. But
I appreciate her being a regular viewer. I always see her in the chats here, so yeah.
You also had somebody was asking about what PRI was, since for those that joined late, Paranormal Research Institute, and then the RNG stands for Random Number Generator. And if you get an opportunity, you can go back. We've had a long discussion about that. So
yes, we have.
Go back and watch.
All right, start over.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Hey,
Kinda
welcome
like
to
Attorney.
Shaman Sundays.
Okay,
I'm your host,
start
Brandon.
over.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, I'm going to bed, dude.
Well, it stands for Random Number Generator.
Right. Yeah.
Just kidding.
I heard a disembodied voice one time.
And for Jennifer,
I've seen it
the other
go.
thing we were talking about was our research with the random number generator has been published. Mike wrote an article, and it is in the magazine for psychical research. Let me see, here it is.
Magazine for the Society for Psychical Research. Yes.
Mhm.
So, and if you're interested in that, you can go to our Facebook page, is usually the easiest, and we'll have some information there, and you can hit us up for requesting some more information in that. We'd be happy to talk with you or give you some information.
Oh, we can talk them to death. We haven't even scratched the surface, man.
But it's so fascinating. And Mike, you were saying earlier how you bore people. Well, we just went up like 5 viewers.
Well,
So
and
back to the joke.
comment that listening to Mike, it's never boring, and it really isn't, because it's he has such a vast amount of knowledge and the ability to keep it interesting and entertaining.
Lies, all lies.
And then every once in a while, he throws in musical random data, just,
And that's when me and Mike go off in a tangent.
Yeah.
And that's when I go get a drink.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of interject here. I see Rex Nielsen's comment from earlier about I am still here. I would really like to use the RNG and share the data with you. This is the kind of thing we are looking for, and these are the kind of people that we really want to connect with. Because, yeah, it's really fun being on the cutting edge of this kind of research. But ultimately, we want to be the inspiration for future researchers. We want to, kind of seed the ground for them so they can take this. Even they can. I can't believe I'm using a sports analogy. I'll probably use it wrong. Pick up the ball and take it on further down the grid line. What was it called?
Grid iron.
What sport are we talking about?
Matriculate down the
Pick up the
field.
ball and take it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
just pick up the ball and run with it.
and make that basket. And
Yeah.
And
Oh,
and that
it's
is a
off the
really
rails.
valid point, Mike.
And then kick it into the goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we got
that's it.
3 of
That's
them.
it.
So
Because-
that's actually why I named it the Paranormal Research Institute. This is one of those things I really want it to last long past when we're gone, and just keep building and things like that. And so yeah, I mean we're hoping to do more things with it, and branch out some of the investigations, stuff like that. So hopefully it lasts a lot longer than we do.
Right.
Well,
I want some little kid on Tatooine to pick this up someday.
Yeah.
exactly.
There you go.
Well, and the sad thing is, well, I guess it's sad, but eventually we're all going to be like the OGs of the paranormal, and then the next generation. So, what you're doing now is paving the way for the next, Venkman or Spangler.
Oh, who was it? We were just talking about that. Is it Spangler that we decided is the best? I saw that whole diatribe on something where talking about Venkman versus Egon versus Ray.
Egon's my favorite. I like Egon.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
Ray's
Egon.
just so down to earth, and he doesn't have any. He's
Talking Lord of the Rings.
No, we're talking.
there for the actual
okay.
experience.
No, not Aragon, but Egon.
Egon.
From Ghost Hunters, babe. Or
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah. Ghost Hunters was a whole other show.
My favorite was Ray Parker Jr.
Ray
Not
Parker
Paranormal
Jr.
Exotic Ghost Hunters, so.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts. This has been an amazing. You know what? I would like to have
Spangler. Somebody just popped in.
Oh, see, that's amazing.
I do, unfortunately, Brandon, have to go in about 10 minutes.
Well, we're gonna wrap it up here in about 5. We'll keep it in a 2-hour show.
For tonight.
Tonight. But I would love to have you all back on sometime next year.
No, sure, man.
Oh,
anytime,
Brandon.
Absolutely,
man. I thank you guys so much. Like I said, when I met y'all, it was, first of all, you're super down to earth, and I don't know if y'all knew it, but that was my very first Paracon ever.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
No, I didn't know that.
I'm glad you came.
I am too. I didn't get out much. You know, they don't let shamans out much.
Well, I'm sure Jessica kept you in check the whole time you were there.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just say that. Right. We'll just go with that.
Moving on.
Yeah.
So,
But,
yeah,
I mean,
you know, there really is, there's something kind of crazy and magical about Paracons. You know, we wouldn't be anywhere if we hadn't gone to the Paracon in Kansas City.
Right.
And, you know, we
Right.
never would have met you. We never would have met Mike.
Yeah.
You know, when we first met Mike, we were outside talking, and Mike, you know, just pulled up, I think, to come watch the freak show.
Mm-hmm.
And
The Monk of Baggins.
And so, you know, to me, a parapsychologist was kind of like, you know, meeting a unicorn. You know, you hear about them, you're never going to see one, and then, you know, this you know, wise parapsychologist man who looks like Gandalf. I wish you could all see what Mike looks like, because he looks like the White Wizard.
He really does. I just sent you a friend request, by the way, Mike, and
or Jerry Garcia from the Great.
You got it.
I like the White Wizard better. But
I look like Billy Connolly, but
Well.
But you know, we started talking, and I really expected I was going to pretty much be met with absolute derision, because, you know, some of the weird stuff that I'd come up with and some of the weird ideas, and he never did. I mean, he's called me goofy a couple times, but he has never, you know, disparaged any of the strange thoughts.
Thank you, Lisa.
thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that everybody got to see Mike.
So yeah, I mean, the Paracons are, I can't stress enough how cool they are. And well, I guess where we met Katie.
Yeah, Katie.
So it was at the Kansas City Paracon. You know, we met so many people down there, and it really has moved us forward.
And my whole thing was,
because of
could we,
or because of Paracon, right?
Right.
Our AV chief.
My whole thing was, you know, can we build a bridge between these wonderful people who are so enthusiastic about paranormal research, and build a bridge between them and classic parapsychology using scientific method? And I think we can. I think it might be difficult, but I think it's worth the effort.
It's a thin, narrow, rickety bridge, but I think we can do it.
Well, you know, even a rickety bridge will get the horse over every now and then.
Right.
I think I just made that up. That was weird.
And there's a good question here, Mike. I think we need to address this question. Can you do a live virtual investigation using RNG?
I don't see why not.
Well, and we've kind of done a little bit of that, haven't we? Where we've done it remote. Wouldn't that be kind of maybe you want to address that quickly about how we've also done some other experiments with it?
Yes. We, you know, several people have said, well, what are you going to use for control experiments? And that is a vexed question, because in a way, when you're doing a correlation study and you've only got 2 variables, you don't really need control experiments. I mean, take a look at the Global Consciousness Project, for one thing. You know, you've got, on the one hand, people all reacting to something happening on the world stage, and on the other hand, the readouts of all of their RNGs. Those are just two variables that you compare, and statistically, you don't need really. What are you going to do in the case of global consciousness? Are you going to try to set up RNGs on other planets? I don't.
Right.
The whole chi-square analysis for independence of variables kind of takes that into consideration, because it automatically does mathematically what you're talking about in terms of control experiments. So you don't really need to do that. But we have tried a few things, like running the RNG just in a non-haunted area to see if general random numbers generated by another random number generator would correspond to the numbers generated by my random number generator, and they don't at all. So I guess you could call that control, but you really don't need it.
Well, and we also ran it at Paracon, just so you know, Mike. I don't know if they told you that, but we ran it at Paracon as well, and we got 3 hits the one day?
Yeah, 3-4 hits, something like that.
Yep.
Well, I think we might have got up to 6.
We got 6 actually.
Did we get 6?
Yeah, but
We were more just running it as a demo kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, we typically get maybe 2.5 hits per hour in a typical investigation, but that's not the point. It's not a matter of how many hits you get per hour. It's a matter of, do those hits correspond with something that somebody is reporting? It's the correspondence that's the key.
Right.
Well,
so
there's so much more to discuss. So I will definitely try to have y'all on next year.
of course.
Awesome.
And there was a question, where what was it? Sean said, where was I going to be in South Carolina? I'll be in South Carolina. Maybe you missed it. I'll be in upstate South Carolina.
Stay tuned for more.
Yeah, stay tuned. We're gonna have apparently we're gonna have some very special guests. But I will make all that announcement November 4th. It's going to be so much fun, and this was an amazing show. Y'all are so down to earth and great people. It's my honor to have met you and have each and every one of you in my life.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Brandon, you are wonderful, and I was so privileged to get to meet you as well.
And I look forward to a continued working relationship as well as a friendship. And I always end my show with the same saying, and I'd like to leave it with you and take it with you. And for all of my viewers that hung in there on this special edition of Shaman 2-hour Shaman Sunday, which we still have much more to talk about. Thank you for tuning in. If it wasn't for viewers like you, I would not even have a show. I love each and every one of you. And as I always say when I close out the show, remember, it's not how you survive the storm. It's how you dance in the rain. I love each and every one of you. Light and love. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks, Brandon.
The views expressed